my charge today was to sort of talk about recreational fishing opportunities in the Delta and to tell you a little bit about what UAPB has done to enhance those recreational fishing opportunities. To organize this talk, I put two constraints on myself. One is time and one is place. Now here's what I mean by time. Different people fish for different things during a calendar year. So each month I tried to pick the thing that I thought would be the best recreational fishing opportunity. So I'm going through the calendar month by month, and you'll see that when we get into this. The other constraint was a spatial constraint, and I said, all right, recreational fishing opportunities in the Delta. I will limit my driving to within 2 hours of Pine Bluff. Okay? So the recreational, because there's wonderful recreational fishing opportunities. They're up in you know, Beaver Lake. Well, that's a fair drive from us. I want it to be easy enough that you, like me, could do this, cover your ears, on the way home for 20 minutes. Okay? So this is what I've done, and this might surprise you. If it were January or February, like it is right now, I would fish for trout. But I wouldn't drive up to the Little Red River or to the White River. I don't have to anymore. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission brings trout to me. I would go over to Martin Luther King Park because the pond over at Martin Luther King Park is now stocked with rainbow trout. There is a community fishing opportunity there created by the Game and Fish Commission. I would fish with very small hooks. You can't buy these at Wally World in Pine Bluff. They haven't caught on to the fact that we trout fish down here now, so you have to go up to Little Rock to buy these. And if I were fishing for trout, I would fish with this thing called Power Egg. It's similar to a marshmallow in consistency, but it's put out by Berkeley, and it mimics a salmon egg, but it floats off the bottom, and the trout like this. Now, I'm going to use some aerial views here too. Okay, this is what I mean. I'm giving you my best fishing places. Okay, this is Hested Stadium. Everybody knows where we have the county fair, right? So if you run up the street from that and come back down, this is Martin Luther King Park, and this is the pond. This is where I would stand to fish. If you know Martin Luther King Park, you know there's a purple and green swing set that's right out there. Well, the reason I'm going to tell you to stand there and fish is because right off there, about 100 feet, there's a deep hole. And when Game and Fish Commission puts the trout in there, they run down into that hole. So if you're going to lay that power bait out, that's where I would put it. It just so happens that a graduate student from the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, that's Chip Long, okay? Chip was one of the first people that did research for the Game and Fish Commission on the importance of community fishing programs like the one at Martin Luther King Park. And what he found was that places like Martin Luther King Park are usually used by people that live in that neighborhood, less than 5 miles from there. And they also showed that stocking at there intensifies the importance of angler satisfaction. So we now have opportunities to trout fish in our backyard, partly in point because Chip pointed out the importance of community fishing programs. If it were March, I would fish for white bass. The white bass come out of the Arkansas River and they spawn in tributaries of the Arkansas River. I would use a little bit heavier line, and I'd use this little thing right here called a sassy shat. You can buy these out at the bait store. I would put maybe a 1/4 ounce jig head with a sassy shat on it, and this is where I would fish. Okay? Just to orient you, this is Saracen Lake. It used to be Lake Pine Bluff, but we don't call it that anymore. This is the road out to the Pine Bluff Nature Center, which is right here. The bottom of Lake Langhofer, you can run out of that up to this called Caney Bayou. This runs right through our campus. Okay? And there is a new Saracen Landing walking trail that walks you right up the side of this, and this part is graveled. It's not paved yet. This much is paved. Most people who get out here pay attention to the lake. Don't. Walk down the other side of the levee, okay, because this is Caney Bayou. And at this time of the year, the white bass are going to start running up into Caney Bayou to spawn. In fact, okay, there's a deep hole here. That's my favorite fishing spot for white bass. Okay, yeah, I see you. You're going, yeah, I know that hole. I know that hole. Okay, it just so happens that we have a graduate student who is right now doing research on the white bass in Pool 4 of the Arkansas River. we at one time were kind of concerned that maybe we fished that spawning run so hard that we hurt the white bass. Well, one of the things he found is that the white bass do not only use that tributary. Every tributary in Pool 4 of the Arkansas River gets attention by spawning white bass. The other thing that he found, and this is one you keep under your hat, when the temperature of the water gets to 13 degrees, 2 days after a good rain is when the fish will come up in there. Not 1 day, not 3 days, but 2 days after a good rain, there's enough water flowing out of there that it really draws the fish in to spawn. If it were April, I would probably drive down to Lake Village and go crappie fishing in Lake Chico. I'd use minnows. Remember, Arkansas is the #1 producer of bait minnows, and I would recommend using minnows or using this marabou jig. And this is Lake Village, okay, just to orient you. And this, you can kind of see, yeah, this, I want to call your attention to that. That's Connerly Bayou, okay? You jump off of Highway 65 and run around here, and there's a boat slip right on Connerly Bayou. In April, I wouldn't fish Lake Chico, I would fish Connerly Bayou because the fish, like the white bass, are going to come in, find shallow areas to spawn, and use that quite a bit. Just so happens that we've had a couple of graduate students that have done research in Lake Village on crappie, 2 of them. In fact, one of them is now the Assistant Chief of the Fisheries Division of the Game and Fish Commission. And he cut his teeth doing research down in Lake Village. He found that you can actually enhance the crappie fishery in a lake like Lake Chico with fish from the Game and Fish Commission's hatcheries. One of the things he also found, though, was that there tended to be a fair amount of mortality of fish that were raised in a hatchery, like the one at Lone Oak, and taken down to Lake Village. Now I'm going to back up for just a second. Let me find my page up. One of the things that the Game and Fish Commission did as a result of that research is they decided, okay, we're not going to raise the fish in Lone Oak anymore. We're going to raise crappie that we want to stock in Lake Village in Lake Village. And right now, just here, this little brown dot, that's a nursery pond that the Game and Fish Commission built so that they can take fish out of Lake Village, put them in the nursery pond and spawn them, and then just open up a water control structure and dump them into the lake. So there's no more hauling fish back and forth from Lone Oak. They raise them there.
They dump it in Connerly?
They dump them in Connerly Bayou. There's no seining. They just open a water control structure and dump those fish into Connerly Bayou. If it were May, I would probably switch to bass fishing because as the crappie move off their spawning beds, the bass are going to move up onto their spawning beds. I'm going to use a little bit heavier line because I'm an optimist. I keep thinking someday I'm going to catch a 5-pound bass out of the river. And I would probably use a spinnerbait like one of these. Where would I fish? Okay? This is a body of water that is a backwater off the Arkansas River. To orient you, this right here is Highway 79. If you're on your way up to Lone Oak, you know you go, or excuse me, if you're on your way up to Stuttgart, you know you drive over the 79 bridge. Okay? This is before that. This is Pine Bluff Truck and Trailer. Does that tell you where you are now? So you're driving up 79, you turn here like you're going to drive out to the harbor, except you don't. Because when you get on this levee, you know, this is Lake Langhofer and this is a backwater of the river. There are a couple of places where you can drive down and park right next to this bank. If you talk to bass anglers, like bass anglers from Port City Bass Club, they call this backwater the honey hole. And they call it that for good reason. Okay? There are a lot of very nice bass that come into this part to spawn. There is a whole lot of structure. I'm talking little riprap and pylons that are out in the water just along here that are castable within casting distance of shore from here. Now if I had a boat, I would actually go all the way out to the harbor, jump into the river, and I would run up here just before the 79 bridge. You'd kind of sneak around here, and if I were in a boat, I'd be able to fish all the structure along this area. That is a prime place to bass fish in May. We have had a couple of graduate students who have done research on largemouth bass in the Arkansas River. Gentleman on the top is Ben Batten. He now works for the Game and Fish Commission. This gentleman is Brad Fontaine. He is the most recent hire to the Game and Fish Commission. He's now an assistant district biologist down in the Monticello office. What these gentlemen did was look at the bass fishery in the Arkansas River and compare it to similar fisheries elsewhere. And what they found was bass grow well in the Arkansas River, they're in good condition, they're plump, and that bass fishing in the Arkansas River is as good as or better than many of the other rivers in places like Kentucky and Tennessee and Ohio. We have a very, very healthy largemouth bass fishery. We're blessed with a healthy largemouth bass fishery in the Arkansas River. One of the other things they found is that exploitation is around 16 to 20%. Well, most of you have no idea what that means. Here's what that means. Every year, about 20% of the bass in the river are caught and kept by anglers. Now that may seem like a lot. Gee, that's 1 in 5 fish, right? That's actually very low. Most bass anglers are practicing catch and release, which means when they get a fish, whether it's above that 15-inch minimum length limit or not, they're putting the fish back. That goes equal to tournament bass anglers. Somebody earlier referenced the number of tournaments. There are literally hundreds of bass fishing tournaments in the Arkansas River every year. And there are people like you and I that don't fish, I don't know, any tournament bass anglers in the room? You turn all your fish back live, right? Well, one of the things that people who don't bass fish complain is that they think these guys take more than their share. They don't. And one of the things we found is that less than 12% of the fishing effort on the Arkansas River is attributable to tournament bass anglers, which means there's plenty of people out there that are getting plenty of opportunity to fish. Bass fishing is, tournament bass fishing is not a negative. In fact, it's a positive from an economic standpoint because we bring in people from all over the country to fish bass tournaments in the Arkansas River.
If you catch a bass and you put your live well and it dies, you're penalized.
That's right. I mean, maybe people don't know the rules about bass fishing, but that's not something bass anglers want to do. They've got to weigh in live fish, not deceased fish.
Do they eat bass? Or is it just for tournament fish?
One of the things, now remember, there's a 15-inch minimum length limit on bass in the Arkansas River right now. There is some consumption of those bass, but in actuality, that 16 to 20% exploitation that we found, that's really very low. It will not negatively influence the population dynamics to have an exploitation rate like that.
Jeremy Risley, you know Jeremy?
Yes, I do. I know Jeremy very well.
I'm in Monticello Bass Club.
Of course.
And Jeremy was until he moved to
until he moved up north to Jonesboro.
But he helped us immensely in realizing that the general public was watching bass clubs and tournament bass fishing. And so we made a point, and most clubs around the Dumas area or Pendleton area, we made it a point that, I mean, it's for our own good as well as everybody else's, that we don't, anything caught in a bass tournament is turned to catch and release.
Right. Okay, and actually, the Game and Fish Commission works very hard with tournaments to make sure that their weigh-in procedures stress the fish as little as possible. I have only good things to say about bass tournament fishing in Arkansas, and I've only done one. If it were June, okay, I would probably be attempting to fish for bluegill, because as soon as the bass move off the nest, then the bluegill are going to move up on the nests. And one of the places I like to fish for bluegill is Bayou Bartholomew. I would usually use something, probably crickets or minnows. I like live bait if I'm going to fish for bluegill. I think that's a better choice. I'm going to orient you again. Okay, this is the bypass. Okay, that's Wally World. Well, some of you may realize this, some of you may not, but one of the agreements that Walmart made with the Game and Fish Commission when they agreed to build their store there, incidentally, that was part of the Bayou Bartholomew floodplain. They built that up, but what they agreed to do was build and turn over to the Game and Fish Commission a boat ramp that's right off that property. You know, Payless Shoes is right here, that's Walmart. This little road takes you to the bayou, which is running through here. There's the bayou, okay? And along this stretch of road right here, that's the gravel parking lot for the boat slip. Wonderful bank angling in Bayou Bartholomew right there at that point. In fact, there's a lot of times that's not on the way home, but every once in a while, push your ears, every once in a while I'll go home that way just so I can stop and fish for 15 or 20 minutes on the way home. We have been looking, two colleagues of mine, Bill Lair, who now works with the Bayou Bartholomew Alliance, and Mike Eggleton, who is a faculty member at UAPB, they have been looking at the fish community in Bayou Bartholomew prior to and following a habitat restoration project that Bill Lair did. He worked with landowners in Jefferson, Lincoln, and Deshay County to restore the riparian habitat along Bayou Bartholomew. And the hope is that by restoring that habitat, they can keep Bayou Bartholomew fish communities healthy. One of the things that I like about fishing Bayou Bartholomew is it's got a good brim population, but the other thing is the fish community in that bayou is very diverse, which means when I fish there, I got a worm on the hook, I never know what I'm going to catch. Okay, it has a very, very wide variety of fish, and that's a lot of fun. These other fisheries that I've been talking about have basically focused on, one species. I go out and I target a species. But when I fish Bayou Bartholomew, I can catch anything.
Is there a mercury warning on Bayou Bartholomew?
I do not believe there is a mercury warning on Bayou Bartholomew. I am not aware of one. Now, I'm not aware of all of them, but I am aware of some of them, like the one in Felsenthal, and that's the lower Washita, but I'm not familiar with one on Bayou Bartholomew. Okay, if it's July, what am I fishing? Well, it's nice and warm now, okay? So channel catfish are biting, okay? I would probably use something like chicken livers or this stink bait. They're both considered natural, but one you buy at Walmart and one you buy at Brookshire's. But this is probably what I would use. Where would I go fishing? Well, at this time when it's warm and the weather is nice, one of the places that I like to go is I like to go and take somebody younger fishing. This is the youth and senior fishing pond right at the entrance of Regional Park. Okay? This is part of the Game and Fish Commission's community fishing program, which means just like they bring trout down to stock in Martin Luther King Park, they bring catfish down to stock in that. Now, it's a youth and senior fishing pond, okay? Some of you don't need to take a child under the age of 16 to be allowed to fish there, for obvious reasons. I can't fish there without having somebody under the age of 16 or over the age of 65 with me. Okay, I'm not allowed to fish there. But the fishing is actually very good there. Well, it just so happens we've had more than one graduate student who has done research on behalf of the Game and Fish Commission on the Urban and Community Fishing Program. This is Tom Lang. And what Tom Lang's thesis research revolved around was this idea that the Game and Fish Commission has to put their trucks on the road to stock fish in these community fishing ponds. Well, they were stocking fish every 2 weeks because they thought you had to put fish in pretty frequently to maintain quality fishing. Tom did research that showed that you can stock twice as many fish once a month, and the fishing satisfaction and catch of anglers that fish these community fishing ponds does not decline. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means the Game and Fish Commission can put their trucks on the road half as often. If gas is going to go to $3.50 a gallon, you can see the cost savings to the Game and Fish Commission of knowing that stocking once a month, twice as many fish, is not disadvantageous to the anglers that fish these kind of places. Now, there's one more place we want to talk about fishing, okay, and that is fishing in farm ponds. There is no time that isn't a good time to go fishing in farm ponds. The typical combinations are bass, bluegill, and catfish, but UAPB has done some work and is looking at the possibility of stocking crappie in some of these impoundments. I fish with live bait, natural bait, or artificial lures. These two documents are documents put together by the UAPB Aquaculture Fisheries Center and the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. These documents are available through Game and Fish Commission district biologists or county extension agents, and they're how-to manuals for small pond owners. They tell small pond owners, how do I build this thing? What's the ecology that goes on in this? How do I manage fish in these? They discuss a variety of fishing options, including options that have, as a stocking recommendation, crappie, which is something that a lot of places say, you can't do crappie in small impoundments. Well, maybe you can. We're working right now at improving the performance of crappie stocked into small impoundments. Finally, the backs of these talk about troubleshooting. You know, our extension agents often get calls, hey, I got weeds in my pond, what do I do about it? A lot of these things are covered in these two documents, and they're available to you through your county agent or through your Game and Fish Commission district biologist, which likely as not is going to be an alumni of our program. I think I've used my 20 minutes. I'm ready to answer questions if there are any.
Go ahead.
Can you go back to the crappie?
Could I go back to the crappie? The research part, or the fishing, or the what I would fish with?
Back one more.
This one?
Back one more. To the first one.
This is the first one on
anyway,
crappie.
My question is, were you showing like Chico in the nursery pond?
Ah, that's this one.
Right,
okay.
no,
that's the
one.
nursery pond on Lake Chico.
Right, back up one and I saw what I was doing.
Okay.
Very bottom. It's, no. It said,
go forward
link limit
one?
right there. Mortality is high, so link limit is not valuable. It's a 10-inch link limit on Lake Chico.
Yes, there is. Okay. I've had this discussion with their district biologist, wonderful gentleman who is now retired. Okay. You have to understand that as an academic working at a university, my job is to provide the science.
You don't work for Game and Fish.
No, I don't work for Game and Fish. Okay, I can tell Game and Fish what the science says, and the science says that 10-inch minimum length limit is not helping the size structure or the yield in the crappie fishery. Decisions made, and I teach this in the fish management class, decisions made about things like length limits are made in a political, social, biological arena. The gentleman that I was speaking with said, you know, I know your research says that that 10-inch minimum length limit isn't necessary, but I worked so hard to convince the anglers that they needed it that I don't think I'm going to tell them now that we don't need it. The information that we had that allowed us to draw that conclusion was not on the table when they put that minimum length limit in. And I forgot to look this year. You know, the new fishing regulations have just come out, but to my knowledge, they have not taken that minimum length limit off. It's still there.
Right.
But I don't, biologically, I don't think there's a reason for it in Lake Village. But sociologically and politically, there seems to be one. You had a question.
The last one on the ponds.
That was this one?
That one.
Yes, sir.
Now, you said that this information is available at your NRCS office?
No, I didn't. I said the county extension agents have these, and Arkansas Game and Fish Commission district biologists have these, or you can call the center. I got mine from Nathan Stone 3 days ago.
And he is who is Nathan Stone?
Dr. Stone is an extension specialist. Okay.
Do you travel?
Sometimes, depending on the case.
NRCS, we have.
On the novice, we just got inherited them with our property we bought there. I don't know what to do with
You
it.
gotta read these things because they're wonderful guidelines. You know, everything is very clearly spelled out. Why you would do the things we recommend. You know, not just what do we recommend, but why you would do them. It's all spelled out in these two documents.